Assalamu alaikum. Dear viewers, a day before I introduce you to a book titled as A Brief Introduction to Quranic Exegesis, authored by Dr. Ali Sulaiman Ali in a very short video. So I'll be picking up from where I left in that very short video. The author says that the Prophet had to explain and expound upon the verses of the Quran to the Sahaba and his addressees on three special occasions. One, when the typical understanding of the Arabic language would not explain any particular verse. Second, when the literal meaning of a particular verse was not intended by Allah. And third, when the Sahaba by themselves come to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and ask for the clarification of certain verses of the Quran. As one typical example is found in chapter number 10, verses number 63 and 64, and on the verses about the taking of suhoor in the month of Ramadan. So thereon, the author then traces the history of tafsir during the period of Sahaba, because Rasulullah ﷺ had praised certain Sahaba about their knowledge of the Quran, as Ibn Abbas, who is known as Mufassirul Quran, and certain other Sahaba like Ibn Masud. And in the period of Sahaba, we had four schools of Quranic interpretation. One was in Makkah, the second was in Medina, the third was in Kufa, and the fourth was in Sham. So then on, this legacy was continued with Tabaeen, the successors to the Prophet, and we know that no elaborative or complete tafsir was completed during the period of Tabaeen, though it has been said about Mujahid that he wrote a treatise on the of tafsir on the Quran. So then this legacy continued with Tabaeen, and then when we reach to the 4th century Al-Hijra, we see a complete tafsir coming up in the form of Tafsir al-Bayan and Tawil al-Quran by Al-Tabari. And then this trend continued, and the tafasir that developed later on were the tafasir of specialization, till we find the evolution of tafsir to the modern times. So the author has discussed the methodology of the Tabaeen, the methodology of the Tabaeen, and the later periods. And then he traces that history of two categories of tafsir. One is Tafsir bil Masur, and the second is Tafsir bil Rai. And in that Tafsir bil Rai, we have two more categories: Tafsir bil Rai al Mahmud and Tafsir bil Rai al Mazmum. So one, Tafsir bil Rai al Mahmud, is acceptable, and Tafsir al Rai bil Mazmum is rejected by the Orthodox Sunnis, or the majority of the scholars of this ummah. So then this author moves on and records the opinions of Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn al-Qayyim, Ibn Hayyan, Al-Atiyya, Al-Ghazali about the tafasir and the trends of the tafasir. And then he further discusses upon the tafasir that took a special color. For example, the tafsir by Mu'tazila, the tafsir by Sufi, and the tafsir by Ahlul Rai. So then on, he moves on to the modern tafasir, and he says that then the specialization that developed during the 4th century Al-Hijra continued and solidified in certain tafasir, where the tafasir were being approached from a spatial standpoint. Like we have Al-Jawahir of Sheikh Jawahar Tantawi, which discusses about the scientific approach to the Quran. And similarly, we have rhetorical or sociological approach to the Quran, as we find in Fi Zilal al-Quran of by the author of Milestones, because I don't remember his name at this particular time. Ibn Sayyid Qutb, okay, Sayyid Qutb. And then we have the tafsir by Aisha bint Abu Bakr Ash-Shati, which has been famously known as Bint Shati. So his tafsir is a philological approach to the tafsir of the Quran. Similarly, we have a spatial approach which combines the modern and the traditional mode. That's the Tafsir al-Manar by Rashid Rida. So